So let's get started. I'm so delighted that our Center on Aging was able to help make this exhibit, Bodies in Translation, Age and Creativity, possible here on the Mount campus. It's been a new adventure for us, for sure. We've learned a lot, but one that's been quite well received. It's drawing in students, our own university community, our community stakeholders from the Center on Aging, as well as members of the general public and the arts community. So this exhibition is actually a collaboration between the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging here at the Mount St. Vincent Art Gallery, and the SSHRC-funded Bodies in Translation project. The exhibit opened on September the 9th, and it runs until November the 12th, for those of you in the YouTube world. Associated with the visit, exhibition has been a number of special programming events. And this was organized by the different partners involved in the project. So we've had receptions for the International Day of the Older Person, and we've had a number of different panelists throughout the fall. So today's panel discussion is one of those particular special events. And we're very excited that we have different partners involved. And we really, today, what we're trying to do is to consider how art and art exhibitions, such as this one, can help support social change, especially in the context of what we think, how we think, our view and our perceptions of older people and aging. And the other thing that we're trying to do today is to really challenge us to recognize the contributions that, both social and cultural contributions, that older people make to our community. So we're here to celebrate that as well. So the panel fits into our center's role of building capacity in age-focused research, brokering the academic world with the community, and enhancing practice and policy perspectives, and in this case, the artist practice. One of the assumptions that was driving age and creativity exhibition is that meaningful exposure to the diversity and creativity of older adults is critical to challenging unexamined and stereotypical understandings of aging. Where aging is actually viewed as a reduction term such as burden, loss, or disability. This exhibition has an intersectoral social justice for change lens, and it features professional older adult artists from this region, one we're very pleased to have with us today. With this as a backdrop for our discussion, it's going to be my pleasure to introduce you to all of our panelists who have been invited because of the distinctive lens that they bring to the conversation. And so the way I should explain, we have the panelists, and then we have a series of questions, and then we'll eventually open the floor to the audience. So first, Dr. Ardra Cole is the Acting Dean of Education, Professor in the Graduate Program of Lifelong Learning, and Director of Mount St. Vincent Centre for Arts-Informed Research and Teaching. Ardra has published extensively in conventional and non-conventional academic prose and in alternative scholarly non-print media, and has a series of books on the role of arts in research. Her research on caregiving and Alzheimer's disease, which involved a multimedia installation and performance, was foundational to her establishing Elder Dog Canada. Yes, we have the creator here of Elder Dog Canada. It's a national charity that honors older dogs and the older adults and the special bond between them. We're also pleased to have Bill VanGorder, who is a member of the National Board of Directors for the Canadian Association for Retired Persons, and the past chair and senior spokesman for the CARP Nova Scotia chapter. He's chaired the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on Seniors Issues, and he's the secretary of the Serving Seniors Alliance of Nova Scotia. Bill is a frequent speaker and advocate on seniors issues, and in addition to his seniors issues hat, he wears many hats. He also has an arts interest, being involved with supporting youth orchestra and very active in the Theatre Arts Guild, having been both a performer and a producer of plays. So welcome, Bill. Thank you for coming. Marcel McKeough is Executive Director of the Culture and Heritage Development Division, Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage. In his portfolio, he is also responsible for Creative Nova Scotia Leadership Council, Arts Nova Scotia, and the Nova Scotia Heritage Advisory Council. Prior to his public service role, he had a career as a music teacher. So welcome. Marcel Fernandes, last but surely not least, is an instructor at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University, and his works include mixed media, installation, performance, as well as audio and books works, and his work has been exhibited extensively. He's one of the contributors to Bodies in Translation, Age, and Creativity, this exhibit here at the Mountain. So we're very pleased to have you. Thank you. So as I said, the format for today's discussion is that I have a number of questions that I will direct to all of you in some cases, and other questions that'll be directed at individual members. And it's hoped that you bring your own perspective to the responses to these questions, and it'll develop into a cross-exchange and dialogue against some of these different perspectives. In doing so, I have to be mindful of time, so that's maybe my biggest challenge here. But there'll be also opportunity to, following my exchange with the panelists, to have you as audience members to participate, offer comments, ask questions, and so on. And we'll also have a bit of time at the end as well if you want to have an informal viewing of the actual art exhibit. So, without further ado, I think I'm ready. Are you ready to ask a question? So this is actually a question for everyone. Just, in a couple of minutes. What motivated you to participate in this dialogue today? And why do you feel this dialogue is important? Why don't we start down here with Bill and come this way, and then we'll go back, okay? So what motivated you?
I was so pleased to hear that you were doing this and having an opportunity to reinforce and counteract the mistaken impression that seniors are just a drain on society, that once they get to a certain age, there's no more involvement for them, and to understand that as we grow older, more and more people reinvent themselves, and often it is the opportunity to involve themselves in the activity that they haven't been able to in their earlier life, somewhere in the arts. And I think it's so important that we recognize that very important contribution from people of an age in our community.
Thanks, Bill. Marcel.
Well, I'm actually here, I'm subbing for somebody. We originally tried to get somebody a colleague from our Department of Seniors, and they couldn't make it, and so Pam phoned. But when she spoke to me, the premise was, is there somebody in government that you would suggest? But after speaking to her for just a couple of seconds, I thought, well, that's me. I would suggest me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I was really pleased to be able to do it because I think this is a really important subject, and I'm intrigued by this exhibit. And my wife and I came out, and we came to the exhibit on Sunday. And we'll talk about that a little bit later maybe, but I just think that, to Bill's point as well, we live in a society that where there are a lot of seniors, and yet they seem to be undervalued, and also we seem to conveniently underestimate their potential. And the field in which I work, I encounter a great number of retired seniors who are actively engaged, and in rural Nova Scotia in particular, where you see that they are driving the energy. And so I was just glad to sort of contribute to that.
Great, thank you, and thank you, yes, again, for saying yes to us. We appreciate it. Ardra.
Yes, thank you. It's my pleasure and privilege to be part of this panel. Building on the earlier comments, of course, from my perspective, seniors in our society are all too often rendered invisible. So having this wonderful exhibit to shine a light on older adults' work and creativity, using age and creativity in the same sentence or phrase is itself a challenge to the stereotypes that were mentioned. The other thing that it really excited me and continues to excite me about exhibits, about art in public places, about art related to older adults, by and about older adults, is that art and this exhibit provides a different way of understanding. And I think all research can do that. I'll get into that a little bit later. But when it's one thing to read or listen to, be told about issues, experiences, accounts related to aging and creativity, it's quite different and quite another experience to engage with this work, all of these works, because it provides an opportunity to connect in a different way with representations of aging and to understand elements of aging in a way that's not possible through other forms.
Great, thank you very much. Michael, what's your perspective?
I'm not here to represent all the arts or all artists, but I'm the artist on the panel. And because of that, I will be so self-centered about it all that you'll be probably willing to smack me or something. But really, as far as I'm concerned, age is ageless when it comes to creativity. I know I am aging, but I don't focus on my aging. My work is not about aging. My work is more about agelessness. And by this I mean, I am always learning. I don't know what it's about. I think there's a perception that art has to be understood. That to me is a misnomer. I am not pursuing anything with the willingness to understand. I'm a curious individual. I am trained, but I come from an untrained situation always. It's, for me, the advantage is to be starting over every day. And it's not a physical challenge that I have when it comes to making my art. It's more a disability in terms of my intellect, or a sense of wanting to know about what I am doing. This wanting to know is supported by an overall curiosity that I envision and also feed daily by having encounters with individuals from other fields and also people on the lay circuit, people who I meet. My art tends to be personal. It comes from my experience, and my experience is one that I trust and I bring to what I do. And I would just like to say that for me, it was an opportunity to be here on this panel, and it was like having an opportunity to think and to discuss and to have a conversation. And I take that to heart, and I would like to have that anywhere I could find it. And this place is offering it. So I'd like to present myself as part in a conversation with you.
Thank you. You're sitting by the lifelong learner, and you're obviously one of those individuals, so we appreciate your perspective for sure. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to target now a couple of people. First of all, Marcel and Ardra. And I'm going to ask you from your respective role. And so, Ardra, we've labeled you the researcher and educator. And Marcel, we've labeled you the public policy analyst or planner, just so you know in what role we've categorized you, which may or may not suit your perspective. But so what we want you to know from your respective role is what's your understanding of the value of the public art exhibition, such as this one, and how could or how have you used this type of exhibition to influence change given your role? So what's the role, and how might you or have you used an exhibit to influence the change given your role? A before M.
Okay, thanks for the questions. So thank you for the responsibility of being the researcher.
And representing all researchers
right,
as artists, and
Yeah.
obviously it's your perspective.
Yeah, I see a very strong connection between art and research, mainly because I see art forms of various kinds as opportunities to engage. They're opportunities to make a difference. There are opportunities for social change. I mean, I think we all know the power of art and the role that art has had historically in social movements and social and cultural change. And I think in universities, in more conventional research, we don't often take advantage of an opportunity to see our work as a form of social change. So when we marry research and art, we create that opportunity. I think, like art, research can be a form of engagement, and when bringing art into research, we create a space to engage, to learn, to think. And so with an exhibit like this, it's such a wonderful opportunity for members of the public and as an educator to bring students to really become immersed in the work, to engage with it in not only a cognitive or intellectual way, although that is obviously very important, but also there are so many other ways of knowing. We know through our bodies, and we know through our emotions in a very strong and powerful way. And most of what we provide students in universities and through research does not engage the emotions and the body. And so our ways of understanding and knowing are quite limited. So using these forms of art as a way of thinking about learning and broadening understandings is really an opportunity for engagement. And I think that also allows us as researchers and academics to think differently about the audiences for our work. So the fact that, this is a project that is research-based, research-funded, made available to diverse audiences in a whole variety of different ways. I think that says a lot about the directions that we're moving in and how important it is for us in universities to take very seriously our social responsibilities to move our work out into places where we can engage diverse audiences. And I'll stop there for now.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Marcel?
Thank you. I think I'd be the first in the class to second Ardra's viewpoints, and I think the theme of her comments is exactly going to be the theme of mine. But I would just say that art in 21st century society, and art exhibits have been around forever. I mean, it's you can change your laptop, but you're not going to change artistic expression. It was expressed in caves thousands of years ago, and it's throughout history, creating and exhibiting art has been something, humankind has done forever. And in this instance here, where it's a subject-focused type of endeavor, it's just a refinement of the act of wanting to express ourselves. And that's what we call upon the arts to do. We look to artistic thinkers to, take ideas and give us some element of consideration, something to think twice about, something to consider, some way to change our mind, or some way to reinforce our position. And, it's a very... it's an extremely fundamental act of society is to express ourselves artistically. And often art will provoke dialogue, which I think that's the real benefit. It's about provoking dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I told Bill before we started today, I had encountered an economist at a presentation at an economics conference I was at, and a very scholarly individual who began to say, well, Nova Scotia has so many seniors, and that's an economic challenge. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, geez, is everything going to be measured by earning capacity and by, like, this person seemed to fail, that the real tour de force in Nova Scotia society is the fact that we've got healthy seniors, and the way they contribute is significant. And yet, a lot of Nova Scotians still don't get that, because they're repeatedly getting messages that are the opposite. So an endeavor like this actually does create a chance to have the discussion. No, hang on, let's look at this differently. And these are provocative. This is a provocative exhibit. And my wife and I said we came to it, and we're both 60 years old. I shouldn't be telling you her age, but I'm 60. So we're right on the threshold of being seniors, and we look at life with that eye. But we're both still employed, gainfully employed. But when we came out of this exhibit, I think some of our basic assumptions had been challenged, and I think our perspectives had been challenged. And we were given there's a great amount of depth here and a lot of things to think about. And so I think that is the key element of this that's so important, is it creates dialogue, and it calls upon a methodology that's thousands of years old. And I'll just say, how does it help in terms of my work or my everyday? And I am neither public policy analyst. Maybe I'm not really a planner neither. I tell people I'm the banker, because that's what I do. People come to me and they say, or they come to my staff and they say, we've got an idea and we're looking for $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million. And then we work with them to see if we can pull those ideas off. But the problem I have are my bosses, elected officials in the province of Nova Scotia. You, the citizens, are electing people, and they come from this vast array of life. And if they've not had exposure to art, then we have a challenge when we go before them and make an argument. But when they can come in here, any person can come in here and be moved by what they see and have an evolved level of thinking. So for me, this methodology is very important. And indeed, people who are elected often are conscientious citizens who want to be elevated, who want to have a greater understanding of any subject matter, especially with one that's relevant, like seniors is, for example, or the creation of art. So I think that's how that would help us.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask a couple of little follow-up just to push you a little bit, and maybe they're to specific, and you can just let me know. I appreciate what Michael was saying around you don't have to understand it. It has to challenge you and make you wonder. I think wonder is so important in these kinds of exhibits. But getting back to, I know you're not exactly a policy, as you said, a public policy analyst, but how does art and art exhibits, how are they supported by government strategies to promote older people?
I don't actually think they are.
Okay.
They may, as a consequence of the investment that we make, but we're not deliberately saying, okay, we're going to create. This is an exhibit that was funded by Shirk, and that was intended specifically for this subject matter. So it's to point, this would be an example. But typically, we're not calling for that. Investing into the arts as a public body is very tricky business, because it's our job to provide the investment without any encumbrance. And it can happen. You know, politicians might say, hold it, I don't want to invest into that artist. They're NDP, or they're Liberals, or I don't like their attitude. I don't want to hear from them. No, that's not how it works. We're trying to grow artistic expression. And, but from time to time, artists will come to us and say, I have an idea and I want to explore it, and I'm looking for public support to do it. Mm-hmm. And we take that concept to a jury and let a jury of their peers decide whether or not we should proceed. So, not intentionally, but unintentionally, we will respond to the request of the arts world. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just to let you know that we did have funding from the Arts Council?
Yeah, Canada Council.
Canada Council as well as Shirk?
Yes,
and
sorry.
The Nova Scotia Centre on Aging. So we've all, I don't want to give Shirk the only funding to the centre because...
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
No, it's fine. It's just that for us at the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging, we're a small operation, and we felt that this was really important for our 25th anniversary, and it kind of pushed us into an area that we don't have a lot of expertise with, but with Ingrid's help and the Shirk project that Katie Albrecht, who helped to organize it, really helped us to make this happen. So I just want to mention that because I don't think it's in my notes. So anyway, Ardra, I'm going to push you too. You talked about research. What about, we have some students here. What about curriculum? Or do you have, how can art and art exhibitions sort of, can it help us to inform our curricula?
Absolutely. I know that a number of my colleagues brought classes to the exhibit and used this as an opportunity to engage. Galleries and other artful spaces are learning spaces. And I think that we kind of need to think about curriculum in that way. I mean, we are curriculum. And when people come into a place and engage deeply as provoked and as their intellects and emotions are evoked, I think the learning that happens is very powerful. It's very different from reading a text, particularly a dry text. So I think we need to be challenged to include broad notions of curriculum, which focuses on personal experience and the autobiographical, and focuses on all manner of experience and all forms of engagement, because really the goal is learning, knowing, and understanding, and whatever way we can broaden that in a deep and critical way to help students think differently, to challenge assumptions and perspectives and preconceived ideas, and most importantly, to move from our classrooms out into families, societies, and the like to make a difference and to challenge to change. I think that's, that is our goal. So I think broadly about curriculum and this is a very important form of curriculum.
Great, thank you so much. So over to you, Michael. I'm going to just a question just for you. From your perspective as an artist, what drew you to contribute to this arts exhibition? And was there some, personal or professional goal that drew you here? Or could you give us your perspective on that? Just let's hit your mic there. Yeah, thank you.
Two things. I read the call for the exhibition, and two things stood out. One was accessibility, and the other one was disability. And even though, like I said, aging is not something that I focus on, I know I am aging, and whatever I do comes out of that experience. Now, these two words, disability, may not be, as it refers to my work, physical. It may not be resonating in the terms of being disabled by some unfortunate or in some cases, blessed way. But disability is an interesting construct when you are creating work, from my point of view, because it's at the core of communication. And above and beyond, I'm interested in this process, how delivery is made and how perception is understood. And this construct of disability is one that is almost a feeling for limitation, that when it comes to creativity, it's transcended. And I find that an interesting area. I'm interested literally in moving something from the known to the unknown. I consider myself a minder of the gap. I like the gap. I like to exist in the gap. I like the gap because it's a special space. That's a space where things happen. It's a place where I become alive, where I feel creativity exists. So the disability aspect is something that I have been dealing with and I will continue to deal with for the rest of my life in terms of being a creator or someone who makes stuff. The other aspect of accessibility has always been also something that I take seriously. When I make my work, I want the work to be touched. I am not affixed to a particular way of presenting the work. I am not, it's not a precious or a controlling situation. I'm very much aware that the viewer completes the work. I'm very much aware as someone who is interested in creativity that I wear these three hats. I become these three things. I try on these different shoes. When I'm a maker, I'm also a viewer. When I'm a viewer, I'm also a maker. And when there is something as a result of the process, I try to inhabit that, what that could be like. What that could be like in terms of someone receiving or someone coming in contact with it. How it would manifest or how it does or does not exist. I mean, there is a certain amount of regard and context for the work. And this show provided me with a particular context. Therefore, a series of work was attendant to that, whatever those concerns were. But at the same time, disability and accessibility is something that I carry, and I have been carrying it forever. Those are the two things that sparked my interest, and I felt I was already there, and I wanted to be part of it in the way that I make work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insightful comments. And I definitely like the fact that you brought your three hats and laid them out in front so that we can help to see the way that you see in the creation of art, that as an artist, but also as an audience at the same time as somebody seeing what you're creating through their lens. So it's not the way my normal academic training has led me. So, but I can see some parallels. So I'm thinking about it, and I guess that's what we're here to do: think differently about work. I'm going to go to Bill now, and Bill, now that you've heard some of the other comments from the panelists, what messages from them do you feel really bring home are most salient in terms of arts and arts-based approaches that recognize or are catalysts for understanding aging and older people?
Well, I think it's, first of all, so important that we make sure that everyone, not only people of an age, but all generations realize that artistic endeavor is more than just something to fill newfound time, that it really provides a purpose and focus in at least three ways that are so important for people as we age: in communication, in creativity, and in social interaction. It's through involvement in artistic directions that people of an age can express and be involved in that area. And it's a communication vehicle. I'm thinking, for instance, of recently a CARP organized a group of artists, all of whom happen to be people of the age group we're talking about. You may notice that I try not to use any of those words that describe who we're talking about, because whether you use senior or older or retired or anything, somebody gets upset. So I like to talk about people of an age and let you think of that as you will. So these people of an age from CARP were very concerned about preserving the Blue Mountain Birch Cove regional park area that's risking development. So they took the artists into the wild. They painted the beautiful scenery they saw there, then held an exhibition at the Keechen Library, and were able to show so many people who would never get out to the park exactly what we would lose if we lost it. So using this talent that for many of the artists quite newfound or new developed in their recent years to be able to express that, and then the social interaction that these artists and others had because of that activity had a tremendous effect both on them and on communicating that concern. And we think it was one of the major reasons that the council has pulled a little bit back from a fast decision and are really looking at preserving that area. And I think without the involvement of these artists of an age, that probably would not have happened. So there are very practical results that can come. It's not just an activity onto itself. We want to make sure that people of an age feel confident in pursuing an activity that maybe during their younger lives they felt might have been a bit of a waste of time or not as productive in terms of their working life as they would have liked it to have, but that it has a very very basic value for what they're doing now.
Great. And it certainly, that's a really nice example, actually, of engaging both artists and community around a particular goal. But it's also, I guess, what I'm hearing as well is the whole, it being a process. It's not just the result of that picture, that painting that was created, but the whole engagement and outcome that came out of that process, I would say, I think, was really important and was considered art. Yeah, it's very neat.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a question now open to anyone. You can ask. I won't make you answer. But just to throw this out, what do you think we're doing successfully in Nova Scotia in the whole realm of art and aging combined? What do we do well, and what could we improve on? If you can't think of something that we're doing well, and I don't want to start with Marcel, that's not fair. But you know, what are some of those initiatives or programs related to art and social change that we could be building up more? Or what could we do? Oh, he's jumping right in.
Okay.
I didn't mean to, yeah, it's not just for you, Marcel, it's for everyone, so.
Well, maybe I can help initiate the answer.
Okay.
You know, it's an interesting question, and I love the fact that it's posed in the positive. But let me just add some context there. Nova Scotia, according to Statistics Canada, has, it's not the #1 province in the country, although it had been previously, or the #1 country in the province, in terms of professional artists per capita. So even though we're not #1, I'm not sure if it's Vancouver, if it's British Columbia or Ontario these days, but we're way up there. For a province of less than 1 million people, we have a disproportionate number of professional artists. Now I'm talking, you know, we're in the context of mostly visual art, or the work behind me, which, you know, it could be the work of an artisan as well, I suppose, but you know, musicians, filmmakers, writers, poets. And what it means is that we have this amazing resource, and like the rest of Nova Scotian society, it's also probably demographically skews older than the general population. So to me, that says that Nova Scotian, for a lot of artists, is a place they can reside comfortably and they feel they can create here. So I'm not answering your question, but maybe putting context for the others.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
It's something that I think of in terms of the gatekeepers, in terms of representation, or the people that are responsible for presenting and initiating projects. There's a responsibility there that is the outcome of what the public engages with, you know? So this person or people or system where art is being presented is it's a tricky one. From my point of view, the people that do the picking and the jurying and are somewhat vetting the work, I hope and I grave respect for a certain, what should I say, but not just for an amateur, but comes with a commitment to the research, a commitment to the role, and a seriousness with the job. These people are very important, and they ultimately are the ones, I mean, the artists are working away, they're all working, and there are a lot of art that is being made. But the art that we see as public are responsible to those gatekeepers, those people who are in the position. We are very fortunate here to have some of these people, and this gallery I regard as one of these. In my estimate, person Ingrid, who runs this gallery, has been and is a representative at the highest level. And when it comes to comparison for other provinces, this Ingrid shines. So there is no lack of, when it comes to this institution, of fulfilling that link or that ability to bring to a public a certain quality or maybe high challenge. It's important, I think. I don't believe in spoon feeding. I don't believe that anyone here who is just simply from whatever walk of life, but are simply not curious, is really willing to be open to anything. And if you are, therefore, that openness is up for a challenge. And that challenge is something that these places should be about. And this place for sure is. So as far as an individual living here in this province and have been here since 1972, this work is being done in this institution, and I hope it continues.
Thank you very much. And I think, if I understand what you're saying, that while our particular gallery, and as evidenced by this particular exhibit, actually helps to allow more freedom of expression and more less, as you said, spoon-fed art, right? So that some of the access maybe that needs to be challenged is the way in which juries actually, who comprises those juries, and what is it that they're, how open are they to the alternative, to the gap, if I can use your, to those who live in the gap and want us to think about what is happening or challenge what is known, which I think you mentioned before. So that's very interesting. So what do you think, Ardra? Do you think that there are some successes? Is there merit in terms of in terms of what Michael is suggesting, that there is inherent bias in our community as to what is art? And I'll just before you, I actually, when you're talking, I was thinking, I had the privilege to be in Paris yesterday, and so I was reading about all these artists, and I'm not a connoisseur, I've never been trained, so don't, but what struck me is how what we consider like incredible artists now were shut out of galleries because their art was not viewed as appropriate or authentic, or and yeah, so I thought that was just so curious to me when looking back 100 years to think that, you know, the Monets and the Manets and those folks were not even considered as making a contribution, right? And so it's kind of links into what you're talking about, who's making these decisions, right? And what are we doing well? Even with that, perhaps this oasis of the Mount is one thing, but where else might we find those oases?
Sorry, I'm not sure I can identify the oases, but I will pick up on the point about who makes the decisions. I mean, I think very broadly, we live in an ageist society, so there's ageism and age discrimination in every sector, and so the art community is not left out there. There's so why should we think that it is? And you know, who makes decisions is you know, kind of flipping that. Who makes decisions is the critical question, you know, within the art community and within other communities. As an academic, you know, in competition for funding and for variety of you know, different maybe grants or publications or whatever, we always turn back to asking the question, who is making the decisions? And so I think Marcel made the point earlier about the need to, you know, to change that. And I think there's an element of hope, you know, with the positive that, you know, there is some consideration being given to who is making decisions, what decisions are being made, and, you know, intention or some activity related to shifting the question away from kind of success and productivity being tied to, you know, economic gain, and kind of reframing that question in a different way to think about wellness and creativity and other ways of being well in the world, which includes having spaces both to make and to appreciate and engage with art. So I'm always living in hope, but I think not blind to the context, the reality that those who are making decisions are part of the broader societal context that unfortunately is quite ageist.
Yeah, it is true. It pervades so much, including this world. Bill, did you have a comment? Anything that you wanted to add, or?
Oh, yes.
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 Please,
There are
go ahead.
in two areas. First of all, in terms of a specific, one of the things that the province is beginning to do more of, Marcel referred to it, is recognize the economic contribution that seniors make in our province. And they're planning a third Silver Economy Summit that's coming up in March. We need to have art from people in age at that, so that all the people who attend can see this part of the contribution that is still hidden. We used to have an art show in the downtown in the World Trade Center.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's there anymore, and it probably was somewhat hidden away from most people to see it. It seems to me that at events like the Silver Economy Summit, we need to emphasize this contribution too, because it is part of our economy. And also, to the second thought that follows that, it's important that people realize that that involvement in the arts of all kinds does have a very specific health and social benefit to the people of an age who are developed in it. As I'm sure some of you know, but the AARP, which is our American counterpart for CARP, along with the, and let me get the group of the U.S. National Endowment for the Arts, did a study a few years ago, and they found in their study group that was involved in the arts, there was an increase in stabilization of health, lower medication use, lower use of over-the-counter drugs, an improvement in morale, and an improvement in people who were depressed, and loneliness, of course, was not, and loneliness is probably one of the major issues with many of our older people of an age now, and that was decreased too. There are practical values of being involved in the arts that we need to support and we need to encourage. And as I said earlier, not just look at it as something that these people use to fill their time because they've got more time today.
Yes, please, Marcel.
You know, you're endeavoring in a field that I deal with every single day, that I do with this so much, and it's not a book, it's a volume of books. But there are some simple elements that I think are really worth saying to the audience today. You know, the first one is that, now this is not a theory I know, but it's a theory I espouse, so for all that's worth. I believe that artistic expression is the equivalent to freedom of speech. Those two things are actually one in the same. To have a public investment available to artists to express themselves freely so they can, their voices can be heard, is the ultimate in freedom of expression. And if you look in country, or is freedom of expression, is freedom of speech. And if you look in countries where there is oppression, you will not find expression of art that is free. You will find expression of art that is designed to achieve the mandate of the government of the day. So that's one thing. The second thing is that although this conversation is about artistic expression, it's also about cultural expression. And so Bill's reference to the Silver Economy Summit and to the collection that was up in the World Trade Center, I don't know, by the way, if it's still there or not. I
don't think so.
I'm not in that building anymore, but certainly it was, and I loved it. And they were amateurs by everybody's measure. But you know what? They were people who just expressed themselves. And I always felt like it must have been a very healthy thing for them to get their work there, and more importantly, to see it hanging for others to see and take it for what it was. And I think that, you know, a society that encourages cultural expression and artistic expression is a society that's actually going to do fairly well for so many points. And Bill did say, and he's actually 100% correct, about the determinants of health. The book publishers in Nova Scotia once argued to us that it was number 11 determinant of health in Canada, according to Health Canada, that reading and engagement in literary arts was a determinant of health, and it sure is. And I think probably that is true of all endeavor and cultural activity. But to see, in this instance here, and we're talking about age, and we're talking about age is ageless, Michael. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. I love it. You know, this is a way for people to come in here of all ages, not just for the aged, right? For all ages to come in here and have a second thought about what aging means and the challenges on it. So I just, you know, the most important, when in my world, and people who surround me and say, like, why are we spending money in your department? Why are we spending money in culture? This is, you know, the expression, well, I can't even say it on the microphone. It's frivolous bullshit. That's what they would say to me, okay? But they don't understand that the act of creation and the act of receiving this is incredibly empowering or provocative, and it elevates the conversation. And so that is the public good in the investment in culture.
Wow, I want to clap. Thank you, and thank you so much for all your insightful responses to that particular question. It strikes me that, you know, the responses are in fact at multiple levels in our society. there's those individual well-being issues, but there's these broader societal, well-being of our larger society in terms of the freedom of expression and connecting that to our basic human rights, I think is a really important and insightful way of looking at the issue for sure. So just thinking, anything else that I didn't ask you that you would like to make a comment on before I open us up to ask the audience if they have any questions? Is there any other reflections that you heard from listening to each other that you wanted to? Yes.
As an artist, I do not like to be chosen for my culture, for my race, for my ethnicity, for my belief, for my disabilities, for my accessibilities, for my color. I want to be accepted for my work. And to me, that's the ultimate thing, the work. The work is more important than the individual. For me, it's all a contribution. And I don't care who does it or who owns it. Nobody owns it, as far as I'm concerned. The fact that it's done, that's important. That's very important. And just support the doing and to facilitate it is very important. And I think just from a personal, we have to be careful, sensitive, that artists are not interested in being pigeonholed. And we seem to have a system where we tend to educate or point to success in ways that are attributed by who and from where the work is done. And I think this is problematic in light of a subject that is being researched, engaged, and just totally part of a curriculum. And maybe that's a concern, that we're not electing people because of who they are. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other? Yes, Ardra, sure.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on a couple of things. One of Michael's point about the gap, which I really love, and the other point about engaging all ages. Because one of the things that I think is so powerful about the art, and of course about this art in particular, because we're surrounded by it, and that feels wonderful, is that all of these works are open texts. And they don't have a particular message to communicate. There's a theme, there's a context. And because they're open, everyone who comes to spend time with, whether it's an artifact, a series of artifacts in an installation, visual images, textile work, whatever, everyone who comes to this engages on her or his own terms and makes a story out of that. And so the capacity to go beyond the information given, so to speak, is so strong, it's so powerful, and that gap that Michael was mentioning is really where the creativity, the imagination, the power, the force of the work and the understanding really happens. And so even though people can come to this space to view works by and about age and creativity, their engagement and what they take away can go so far beyond the imagination of the individual artists, their intentions, if there were explicit intentions, and can also go well beyond the whole theme of age and creativity. So this open space is so powerful, and I really don't know and very many other places outside of various art, creative spaces like this, where that kind of learning and challenging of one's assumptions can take place.
That's great, thank you. And that is kind of exactly what we were hoping to challenge some of those assumptions. So I appreciate speaking about that in terms of the exhibit. I'm going to turn it over to the audience now in case people have a question or a comment that they would like to ask the panel, either a specific person or whomever. I'm going to go right to Katie because I knew she had her hand up.
Thank you so much to the panelists and to Ingrid Jugnu for this amazing exhibition, and to Eliza Chandler and Lindsay Fisher and Carla Rice, and to Janice and Pam. And so I don't know if it's so much a question as it is a comment. And Michael, I was struck by your description, and this is how I encountered it. Description of disability as a wanting to know and a desire to know. That's how I heard it. And I was just thinking about the title of this panel and about challenging assumptions and the social and cultural contributions of people of an age, and I'll be thinking with that for some time now. And I just, based on your discussion and everyone, all of the panelists, I was thinking that the contribution really is the invitation to imagine oneself as part of a conversation. So you talked about, being part of a conversation, and that was really important. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for the blurring of boundaries, because I know in my own research, which is very, very amateur, but thinking about, what is the value of art within the context of understanding care for people who are 65 years of age and older, and all, again, these other descriptors and qualifiers. And I get caught up against, or in between, this binary of the instrumental, so thinking about what are the, what are those therapeutic effects? So that's like one type of literature. And then the aesthetic, right? That there's something about reminiscence work and coming into things and finding meaning. And I guess what this panel did for me today was make it okay to not go with one or the other, and to really understand them as there's a little bit of both. And your focus again, Michael, on work too, really raised the meaning of the aesthetic and the instrumental aren't necessarily separate, and these are heuristics, and that's just the way that I interpreted it. And another thing that supported that interpretation was, Ingrid and Eliza and Lindsay's work to think about how it's not simply the tactile and the different emotive aspects of the works here, but how high something might be on a wall. And very often we can just treat that or dismiss it as though that's just a technical matter, but it's a technical matter that can mean quite a bit. So not really a question, but thank you all for your work. Thanks,
Katie. Does anyone have any want to comment? Oh, yes,
So,
Michael?
Something she said, the idea that this word art fulfills some kind of, has a recognition You know, if you think about it, it was mentioned earlier on, from the caves onward to now, that it's been always something, it was always part of our life. No doubt it has changed, and it continues to change, and it continues to morph. If this is an incentive or an encouragement for anybody of age, let's say, since that's the focus and that's the theme, it's the possibility of creativity, not the idea of art. You see, like, I think once you use that term, there's an expectation, there's an idea of what it is. And I'm functioning in this world, and I don't, for the life of me, pretend to know what that is. I don't. And I don't care what that is, really. It's not a really, maybe it's a phenomena, but it's not something that I even care. But I do care about creativity, and I care about the imagination, and I care about curiosity, and all those superlatives that drive creativity. You know? So I would like to feel that this is an opportunity for myself, curators, people in the public who may even think about stuff, that this could be a venue, and this, for whatever one does, that is brought to us from an art institutional point of view. Art is being fed from people who are not necessarily artists. One does not have to be informed. As a matter of fact, I seek more interest in people who are unschooled. You know, I think part of the education is to dissemble, or disassemble. It's not just building information. So we have to watch that we are not framing this with a research that says what it is. You know, and these spaces should be, and like I said before, where the gatekeepers are entrusted with this curiosity themselves, because they are people, and their role is also one, like the artist, is looking at creativity and being engaged, you know, and perplexed and challenged. It's not a form.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes? Oh, did you want to make a comment? No? Oh, sorry. Oh, you're pointing.
Thank you. I just want to ask, if the work of art is timeless, then why are we talking about age and creativity? Thank you.
Oh. If the work is...
If the work of art is timeless, then why are we talking about age and creativity?
If the work of art is timeless, why are we talking about age and creativity? Does anybody want to tackle that? Okay, great.
I'm not talking about age and creativity. I'm not talking about aging at all. I said aging is ageless. As far as I'm concerned, art is what an artist calls it, whatever it is. If an artist decides it's art, it's art. And that opens it to any form of life, any age, any interest. And at the base of that is the unknown. As we sit here, I don't know what that could be until I encounter it. And if I'm a curator, or if I'm an artist, and encountering something, even something that I did, is one that I regard as being something I can learn from. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, creativity is boundless, right? And so does all the responses. That's how I see it. I don't see it governed by any predicament or any particular aspect of our lives. It's what it is to be alive, really. That's the benefit.
Thank you. Other comments? I think I'll answer from, because I think Michael didn't name the exhibit. I worked with the group that did. And I think one of the challenges that we face is some of what we heard today around the ageism that exists in our society. And so while I agree that the art is about the creativity and not at all about the age, I think we're challenged that the rest of the world does not see age as particularly creative. And I know I'm preaching to the converted in this room, but I can tell you, I'm sure there are experiences on the panel that could tell you that there is an invisibility, not even just an invisibility, there is a downright prejudice against someone who appears to be a person, how do you say, of age, of a particular. So there's clearly, both in terms of access to work and access to engagement within our society, let alone access to creativity and art. And I think that's what we were trying to challenge. So if you have a supplement, that's fine. But I do appreciate your question. I totally appreciate the response. But I also want to understand from our work at the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging how much we encounter ageism on a day-to-day basis, both in our own milieu of family and personal lives, to right up to the societal, why bother? What are these people contributing? They are burdens on our society. We read about it in the paper day in and day out. Population aging is going to bring Nova Scotia down. So it's just, you're trying to push against, to me, I'm getting on my soapbox, but sorry, it really bothers me. And it doesn't bother me just because of my particular age. Yeah, I think it bothers all of us in the room, and I think, how do you fight against it? I guess that's what we're trying to create here. And anyway, Ardra has the comment.
I was just going to add to the point about lack of access is the stereotype or preconceived ideas that those who are beyond a certain age lose or never or can't possibly have capacity to be creative, to engage with creative thought, creative practice, or so it's this idea of capacity as well as access, which is, I think, what this is really all about as well.
Thank you. And Marcel?
It's kind of a fun question, I have to say. If you age in creativity is, I think Michael's pretty well covered the road frontier or the beach frontier in the sense of, age and creativity, they're not really connected. Creativity is something all our lives, especially for artists, they wake up every day and they just, their life is different. It's true of everybody in this room. You have to think creatively about how you're going to manage your finances or your children or whatever. But I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you a few examples in the province that fascinate me right to the 10th degree. My favorite is something called Map Annapolis. So this is obviously in Annapolis Royal, and there are a group of seniors down there, and they are all part of the Age Advantage Plus. So I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. And they have been taking their iPhones and going out into Annapolis County and Annapolis Royal area, and they take pictures of, so they decide, today the theme is houses built in 1867, because there's all kinds that have been built down in 1860. They go out and they take their phones and they get all the technical coordinates, the GPS stuff, they take the picture, they take all this information, and like where they were, how long it took them to get there, all that stuff. And they send it to the College of Geological Sciences, just outside of Annapolis, actually. And then they build these maps for tourists who come to the community and say, what is there to do here? Well, what would you like to do? Well, I'm interested in artisans. Are there any artisans? Or are there any artists with studios I can go visit? Well, we happen to have a map of it on your phone. There it is. It's really brilliant stuff. And these seniors are like doing this all the time. And yes, they are coming to us for some support to do it, and we're giving it to it because they are telling tourists how to find artists. They are telling tourists where their heritage buildings are. They are telling tourists. My favorite is a graveyard thing they've got. So they went out and they've captured all the graves of interesting citizens from that community, sent it to Geological Sciences. They went to the public archives. They got history and the information. You can actually stand in front of a tombstone for some of these people, and you can see a picture, maybe the house they lived in. You certainly get their story. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating use of existing heritage. So that's one project. And the other, coincidentally, this is also in Annapolis Royal. So maybe, I don't know.
Maybe the water's
Seniors
different.
down there. But these are just two examples, but there are lots around the province. But this particular one always fascinated me. A choreographer, Randy Glynn, he was actually replicating a work that had been replicated in the early 1970s, and he called it Dancing in the Third Act. And he engaged a number of seniors and choreographed them in a highly theatrical piece. And I think there might have been like 30 in the troupe, and choreographed them, and it was modern dance, and it was just fascinating. And these 30 seniors, some I knew, were having a ball. And they took this show on the road. They first of all, they exhibited in King's Theatre in Annapolis Royal. They had great audience response. Then they took them to Montreal, and they toured up there, and they played here, and they played there. And the work was so, it stood on its own as a piece of art. Absolutely, it achieved that. But at the same time, it engaged a lot of seniors in a very vibrant, expressive activity. And, and when I talked to some of them about the work, they tell stories about some who had passed away and what that did to the troupe and how they dealt with it and how they moved on. And, when I think about the Men of the Deeps in Cape Breton, so these are retired Cape Breton miners who are involved in a choral activity, and they are creating Cape Breton written songs about their heritage. And they are, the last time I saw the miners, the Cape Breton miners, was in Ottawa, in a church in Ottawa. And the audience was absolutely blown away. And they are amateur, they sound amateur, their shows are way too long. But you know what? The richness of the cultural expression, and it's all based on the artistic, music as the artistic discipline, is absolutely fascinating. But there, again, there's no bounds, there's no limit to creativity. These are all different ideas. Yes, they engage seniors. I'm using that example here, but to show the point, creativity is never, creativity's timeless and ageless. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, is true.
Thank you. I'm just curious if any of you think it would be an interesting undertaking here in Nova Scotia to come up with an idea, something like artists in residence in nursing homes. Not just to, facilitate goofy little art projects with people living in nursing homes, but to do serious art from the point of view of being in a nursing home as part of a community, and then really getting across, serious and challenging artistic ideas from that position or location in society. And I'm just wondering if any of you think that would be worthwhile, and if so, how would we go about trying to undertake something like that, how to fund it, how to convince people that this would be an interesting or useful idea?
Any comments, Ardra?
Well, Janice, you would probably be able to speak to that and put you on the spot. But there are a number of really fascinating projects like that. I'm most familiar with poetry, poets in residence and writers in residence. And again, the important thing is in this respect that it's not just about crafts. It's really taking seriously the notion of working hard to create works and to honor, respect, and lend dignity to that which many of the residents can bring to that initiative, whatever that is, whether it's visual art or literary art and so on. I think it's there are a number of fascinating projects, and I don't think there are enough. I don't think there'll ever be enough. I don't know if you have particular examples, Janice, that you can.
There are some, for example, I do know Dr. Rockwood has often had an artist in residence in the geriatric clinic, focusing more on persons living with dementia. But I also think, as when we're talking about this, it's not just about that outcome or tactile or the artifact, but the process, that relationship that each of both the person there who's helping to facilitate as well as the residents themselves could engage in. The challenge is always, of course, supporting that and enabling that, and what are the programs that could help to enable that, I think, because I think that's one of the bigger challenges. Yeah. So.
You kind of said the word funding, so that was. Anyway, my deputy minister would be so proud of me if she sees this on TV and says that I held up the Culture Action Plan. So this is Nova Scotia's Culture Action Plan. I've worked in arts and culture as an administrator and all my life, and in the last 10 years, I've watched how culture has actually become a cornerstone in society in a much different way. And the more I pursue that subject, the more content I find. And the most intriguing one is UNESCO's assertion that, culture is the fourth pillar of a 21st century society. And to illustrate that point quickly, as we don't have a lot of time here, I would just say to you that, culture is to the 21st century what education was, especially in Nova Scotia, in the 19th century. Okay, before the 19th century, children in Nova Scotia did not go to school, could not read, and we had an impoverished society, but that changed when we began to learn how to read and write. And now we all know how to read and write. That's not an issue. But now it's about expression, and expression is so fundamentally important to good health. So the Culture Action Plan is kind of unique because, as someone who's endeavored in this field for so long, we came to a point where we said, we always talk about culture in the music industry, the film industry, and the arts. We don't actually talk about it in its broadest sense, and that was the motivator behind this document. And this document actually does endeavor to promote the use of culture in all facets of society in a way to make Nova Scotian society better. To answer your question, based on that, you can look at this and you can most certainly find an argument that you would turn around to us and say, I'm looking for $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever. This is an idea I'd like to pursue. Here's the details of the opportunity, fund it based on what you said in this, and you'll find that in this. And I think that this is a change in our society, that we're beginning to realize that if you put an artist in residence in a seniors complex, that's fantastic. More of that is good. The challenge for us is funding it. So culture has some very defined elements. Artistic and Arts Nova Scotia, those are very defined elements. The music industry and the cultural industry, those are defined elements too, but are driven by the market. But when you get into culture in the social realm, then the challenge will be on for government because the costs will be astronomical. We have children engaged in theatrical work in the Justice Department. We are trying to empower Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia by making sure that their language actually does not die, but it survives and thrives and becomes a functional language in Nova Scotia. The same with the Gaels and the Acadians. We are trying to create an atmosphere in Nova Scotia where immigrants who come to this province feel like I can stay here, I feel comfortable here, I feel welcome here. My culture is not challenged here. It is what it is, and people accept me and I accept their culture. So there's a lot to it. but the answer to your question is, we would probably consider something, absolutely. Well, there's the plan for you.
You can take home a copy. I think we'll just thank you all for your participation. I want to thank the panelists in particular. You've really offered a whole host of good insights, both from each of your perspectives, and I think challenged the notion of that term of art as creativity. And so we do have a small token of our appreciation for each of you. Michael, thank you. And Ardra, and Marcel, and Bill, thank you. And please join me in a round of applause for our wonderful panelists. We really, really appreciate your insights and depth of your responses. And I'm also wanting to, I'm so pleased that we have been videotaping this event so that we can use it to share with our classes. I know I have a class on next semester on Intro to Gerontology, and the section, the module on creativity now has a place mark. So I hope you signed your form so I can show this to my students. Now I'd like to introduce Ingrid Jugnu, who does not need any introduction. As you know, she's very well known. She's the director of the Nova Scotia Centre in Aging. She's director of the Mount St. Vincent University Art Gallery, and she's been here in Halifax. We've been fortunate to have her here at this gallery since 1994. She was previously a curator at the Dulop Art Gallery in Regina and at the Macdonald Stewart Art Centre in Guelph. So in addition to her appointment, she's also taught art history and theory at the universities of Guelph, Regina, and NSCA, and she was one of the 3 curators for the Body and Translation Age and Creativity exhibition. So I'll now invite her to speak to us a little bit about this. Ingrid, are you able to come up here just so that we can continue to live stream? That's okay. Thanks.
I'll just say a few words about the show. I know you're anxious to get home and get dry. The exhibition, as Michael mentioned, was organized by a call for entries. So instead of going around and around the Maritimes, the 3 curators decided to just advertise for artists who self-identify as older adults and whose work was in some way concerned with aspects of aging or even aging into disability. So we received 29 entries, and from those, or entries from 29 artists, and from those we selected 7 artists to participate in the exhibition. I'm really delighted the way it just happened by chance that we have a number of very well-established artists, such as Michael Fernandes and others, as well as a couple of emerging artists whose first works of art and first exhibition are coinciding in age and creativity. So as people were saying on the panel, some people come to art later in life, and that's certainly true of 2 of the artists who are having their first exhibition in a public art gallery. I thought I would give you a tour of the exhibition, but we've kind of barricaded the art behind the furniture, so I think I'll just introduce it to you by talking about it. At the far end of the room is work by Ani Nordman. And the sculpture is touchable, so it's made out of burrs. People can touch it with caution because it can bite you back. Along the side wall are works by Cecil Day, the black and white prints. Cecil Day is in her 80s and is beginning to feel the limitations of arthritis. So, I mean, this would be an enormous achievement for an artist of any age, but for her, it required a special effort to bring off some of the best work she's ever done. In the interest of accessibility, the plates that were used to make the prints are on tables in the foreground so that people who have low vision can feel the relief on the plates and gain a sense of both the process and the image from that. And then next to Cecil Day's landscape prints is a series of photographs by George Steeves, a Halifax artist, who prefers older people. He likes to photograph older people. He chooses them for their spirit and personality, not for their looks. And so we're used to seeing naked people who are conventionally beautiful. Well, if that's what you want to see, don't look at George's work. These people are not afraid of themselves, as he likes to say, and they confront us with confidence. They challenge us to judge them for the way that they appear in the photographs. Those photographs are essentially portraits, and they are the result of collaboration between the photographer and the subject. So in a sense, it's a performance. Yeah. So I'm on camera. No, sorry. All right. Well, I won't talk about Michael's work. He can tell you all about it. It's against the wall with the purple clock, the headphones, and a number of props. I just want to check the name of the artist over here before I get it wrong. Karen Langlois is one of the beginning artists in the exhibition, and her book is a found book. It's a story of a child who was abducted by Roma and then gets back to her own family. And what the artist has done is transformed the book from something that you expect to be able to read into an object that you need to interact with in a tactile way. She's inserted cloth, she's cut out bits of the story, she's done a number of things to make it a fairly non-narrative event, shall we say. You have to use your hands in order to understand how she's intervened in this very improbable story and made it hers. Around the corner is a video about how to be old and still have a sex life. It's the person who made the video narrates it and is in the video. She is a straight person, but it's entertaining and it's really highly informative. Behind me is a work by Anna Torma, who's a Hungarian immigrant living in New Brunswick. There's a very story embedded in the work. She traded some embroidery canvases back and forth with her aging aunt who'd had a stroke and was still in Hungary, trying to keep the aunt's hands busy so that she could recover more readily. And there's a series of panels, and you can see the stitching peters out, the embroidery pattern falls apart. It tells the story without needing any words. It's a beautiful piece of work and totally touchable. The artist is delighted that finally her work is in an exhibition where people are allowed to handle it just as much as she loves handling it. So I hope this has piqued your interest in the works by the 7 artists who are in this exhibition, that you'll come back when it's easier to walk around the room. And meanwhile, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Ingrid. So that's the end of our panel session. Please feel free to get a coffee and a little sandwich or nourishment. And thanks again for your attendance.